Hi and welcome. I'm Lucy from Inclusive Change at Work, and we have been doing some chats with those people that are going to be involved in our Castle Conference, the Castle Conference based in Bristol, all about digital wellbeing for young people. Today, I'm chatting with Andy Jarman, who is a director at Digital Safety, the organisation that is hosting the event. So, Andy, welcome.
Welcome, Lucy. Hello.
Andy, can you tell us a bit about your role with digital safety and tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, well, as you introduced, I'm Andy Jarman. I'm one of the directors of the Digital Safety Community Interest Company. The company's been running for just over 4 years now. June 2020, we founded the company. My background prior to being in digital safety was I'm retired law enforcement, retired police officer, but continuously then worked within the Home Office, the National Crime Agency, and various law enforcement organisations in regional policing. I went into the digital safety as a company because we saw that there was a real, I thought, a problem with the organisations, communities, and people in general improving their digital capability, their skills, and I could see that there was a massive in skills, smarter and safer education and awareness and thought leadership needed within the world of digital safety. So we set up the company with a mission really to try and strengthen and share the digital expertise that we'd got from our previous backgrounds in policing, in law enforcement, and to try and bring that into a more community and social responsible part of the business.
Big task.
We're trying. It is a big task, yeah.
So I alluded at the beginning of this that we're going to be talking about the Castle Conference, which is a conference all around digital wellbeing for young people. And for me, it's literally what I talk about every day to people at the moment, not just the conference, but the things that we're seeing. So let's get into that a little bit. You're going to be hosting the conference in digital safety. It's your brainchild. It was devised by Digital Safety. Tell us a bit about it. Tell us a bit about why it's so important.
The conference is titled Digital Safety Wellbeing for Young People, and really we're aiming that at younger people, but up to the age of about 25 years old. So it's young people and adolescents. And really the focus came about because we saw that everything, in my opinion, that you hear in the news, or the bad publicity, the press, whether it be knife crime, whether it be sexual exploitation, assaults, whatever it is, all seems to go back at some stage to the internet and to the way that the younger generation and the adolescents of today are living their life online. And so what we wanted to do was actually create an environment where we could bring a lot of people together, professionals together, to create a network of people who could support each other to understand, first of all, the problem of digital in the current sort of generation, but then to also support each other from an agency perspective. Because being an ex-police officer, I'm acutely aware that the police cannot attend every mental health crisis, cannot deal with this problem on their own. I'm aware that agencies, the NHS, whether it be the mental health services, CAMS, and they can't deal with it on their own. So they need to get that collaborative and joint approach. So the purpose of the conference was to try and bring those people together, supported by academic research and eminent people from the profession who could actually give us the academic perspective on what we thought the problem or the solution to the problem was going to be. And then we could start to build on it from there. The first conference was focused quite heavily around suicide prevention, which was the ultimate of what happens when people explore dark and deep places on the internet, online, in their digital world. And we feel that this is a real problem. I'm concerned as a parent, but also as a grandparent now, that my sort of future generations that are coming through have got a real crisis if we're not careful. They've got a real problem on their hands trying to tackle this, and schools or the police or the government cannot tackle it on their own. It's got to be a multi-agency approach, and we've got to get the actual providers of the internet, social services, social media, and everybody involved in this, because it's a problem, and I just think we need to start looking at it really seriously.
That's a theme that's coming through. Our conversation with Professor Kavalak, Peter Kavalak, last week, kind of it touched on the same topics, that this is, people are feeling scared. There needs to be a community approach to this, in that we can't solve it on our own. So coming together is that something that you see can make a difference?
Definitely, and I think that's the only approach to come together. We've got to come together, and we've got to produce evidence. We've got to substantiate what we feel and what we think. I think most people that you speak to today have the same opinion. I mean, everybody I speak to, and every time I turn the media on, or I turn the television on and the news comes on, it's all related to, in my opinion, something to do with the current online presence, whether it be, tragic cases of child exploitation or rape or sexual assault, whether it be knife crime, whether it be people who have tragically, in the case of Brianna Gray and Molly Russell, whether it's been people that have been doing online research and being affected by the toxic behavior and harmful content that's on the internet. For me, every time I look at something now, it all seems to go back to that. And unfortunately, unless we get a grip of it and tackle it, it's not going to stop. It's going to get worse. I mean, I look at statistics as well, especially that's been released by the NPCC, the National Police Chiefs Council. And I look at the statistics around the increase in reports of rape and allegations of child exploitation. And it's frightening when you see that, there's 30% increases in rape under 18-year-old, that 40%
Under 18-year-old.
Under 18-year-old, yes, a 30% increase, over 30%, and a 40% increase in sexual assaults and rapes where both victims, the perpetrator and the victim, are under 18. Now, those figures are quite frightening. And sadly, when people are getting access to the internet now, whether it be pornography or whether it be sort of other types of harmful, misogynistic content, it's almost normalized. It becomes the norm to these people, and they've never really understood anything different. And obviously at their stage of development, their cognitive development in the adolescent and young ages, when that sort of content's becoming almost normalized, then for me, it's a very, very frightening set of circumstances.
We used to have a different world. When I was back in the day, when I was a young girl, you had magazines that were on a top shelf and they were covered up. And that was how you accessed, explicit material, pornography, or, people didn't have access to it in their hands.
Yeah, and I think it's accessibility, but it's also the fact that the content is totally unpoliced. Nobody knows what type of content is there. Like you've just described, at least in those circumstances, there was a bit of a safeguard and it was on the top shelf and it was slightly sort of protected by some regulation, although not a lot. But this is just unregulated. The internet is just the Wild West, in my opinion. There are places on the internet that nobody can police, nobody can actually govern. So what goes on the internet is whatever anybody wants to find. You can find anything on the internet nowadays, unfortunately, and that's what worries me. There's no regulation whatsoever.
So actually, let me bring up a little bit around that, kind of touch on regulation. Let's talk about the online safety bill. What will be the impact of the online safety bill? Tell us a bit about what it is, actually.
Well, the Online Safety Bill has been going through Parliament, and the Online Safety Act of 2023 has really been brought to the fore in the last few months, really. So it's now regulating certain offences. It's holding the larger corporate social media companies and the providers to account. It's trying to regulate, but probably regulate them in a way that they've got to put parental controls and they've got to actually police the sort of material that they're publishing or that they're allowing to be published on their site. So it is going some way to regulate that, but again, it's very hard and it's very difficult to police. But there are some good things to come out of the Online Safety Act, such as last week, for example, there was the very first recorded case of cyber flashing on WhatsApp, which is
Cyber flashing?
now a criminal offence. So again, going back to your analogy of the magazines used to be on the top shelf, well, now that's moved into the virtual world. So what used to happen in a park or in a public place where
Yeah.
we used to have the analogy of a flasher stood there outside the school gates, unfortunately, that's now been taken online. And it is an offence now to actually send explicit photographs to a person without their consent. So we had the first recorded case last week. So there are some really good things to be coming out of the Online Safety Act, but it's still got a long way to go, in my opinion.
Do you think enough people know about it?
I don't think anybody knows about it. I've spoken to people recently about the Online Safety Act, and unless you're in the industry or you're doing your research, and like we are, you're working in this every day, I don't think the general public and the population know about it. I mean, I would be very surprised if the general public did. It's obviously gathering momentum and traction in the news every day, and there are certain instances where it's been referred to, and we've got some good sort of advocates for the online safety bill, but I don't think it's going far enough at the moment, and I don't think the word's out there.
Thanks, Andy. What do you think then? And I'm going to stick a bit on regulation. What do you think about calls for social media and smartphones to be regulated for under 16s?
I think it's a good step, and I think there's been some guidance that's come out only this week, actually, for schools about restricting the use of smartphones in schools and creating a sort of mobile-free school environment. Now, that's absolutely fantastic. It's going to help schools because it'll stop a lot of disruption and distraction. It'll add to the sort of safer and more friendly environment. It might get rid of some misbehavior and certain bullying within schools, hopefully. But that's not regulation, that's guidance, and it's not statutory. And there's been lots of policies within schools where pupils under 16 have not been allowed, or the headmaster mistress has not wanted schools to allow phones in. And that's a good step forward. But it's not just a case of what happens in school, it's what happens as soon as you walk out of the school gate. And yes, it'll go some way to make schools a better place and a better learning environment, but it certainly won't help the people who've got access to smartphones and the internet. It won't help within the home environment. And when you look at some of the tragic and high profile cases, such as Molly and Brianna, it was only after the event that unfortunately people actually found out what they'd been doing online, what access they'd had to harmful content and toxic content. And that didn't happen in school, it happened outside. Yes, there may have been a crossover with some bullying and things that were going off in school, but I think the majority of that was going off in their own bedroom at night when they were there. And COVID has obviously had a massive impact on the younger generation, because bearing in mind they were actually restricted to the bedrooms and the house for prolonged periods of time. So it's driven them onto the internet. It's driven them onto searching the darker places of the internet, and it's the norm. So I don't think that the regulation of trying to prevent under 16s having a mobile phone will solve the problem. It'll go some way and it'll help, but it certainly won't start to solve the problem.
It's kind of like there's a phrase I've been using, and I've heard it a few more times elsewhere. The genie's out of the bottle. So how do we put it back in?
I think the genie is most definitely out of the bottle, and you're quite right. The only way that we can try and put it back in is to try and educate and equip people with the awareness that they need of the dangers by going on the internet, where the dark places are. And we need to educate and equip parents as well. I mean, it's quite frightening when you listen to school teachers. Children as young as 6, 7, 8 years old are taking mobile phones, smart devices. There's a stigma attached with who's got the latest device. So really a lot of it's down to parents to understand what their children are actually doing and how they can actually influence what their children are doing by knowing what they're doing, and also setting a good example. I mean, the other frightening thing that I see a lot of now is when you go out and about into a cafe, a bar, a restaurant or whatever, you see the parents sat there on a mobile phone, mother and father transfixed into a mobile phone, and the kids sat at the side of them probably doing similar.
Okay. So what can we do? What can we do to make a change, and how can we support young people and their families then? We've said that it's important to do that. What can we do?
I think a lot of it comes down to education, equipping them with the right knowledge and awareness of what the dangers are. It's like you've got to. It's in old money. When I used to be a police officer, it's crime prevention, isn't it? It's better to proactively prevent rather than to let it happen. So I think we've got to get on the front foot, and we've got to let people know what the dangers are and where you can go on the internet now, and what apps are, what sort of apps mean, what the different facilities mean. And me being from the older generation, it's very difficult for me to understand what these children, adolescents, young people are doing online at the moment. So I and people of my generation and parents who are probably in the middle generation need to understand what their children are doing and what they're accessing. So I think we can start with that. We can obviously do a lot more with the actual children themselves to make them aware of the dangers, and we can do sort of as much as we can to prevent it that way. But I think it's really down to the parents, to be honest, to understand what the risks are and not to have the unfortunate circumstances where they find out late when it's too late.
And I think parents and families, they need help and support to do that. And sometimes that comes from community, and that community could very well be their school, could very well be, other people around them.
Well, one of the things that we're doing, and one initiative that we're looking at the moment, is to bring what we're calling a digital guardian function into the business, which is to bring the first one that we've actually brought into place is a lady called Lily. Lily's 21 years old. She's got Down syndrome, but she's actually passionate about educating and equipping her peers and people amongst the sort of people of her age group, but less, about the dangers of online. So we're using that as an initiative to get the word over from somebody that understands it and can actually give them some good hints and tips. But also what we're doing in the background is creating a number of training modules and a number of courses, small bite-sized courses that we can take into schools, community centres, and actually provide to people so that we can actually give them an understanding of what the dangers are. And we're very keen to sort of develop that type of material so that we can take it into different environments and actually make people more aware of the dangers, particularly in a school setting, which we'd like to sort of improve on, really. I know that there are organisations already going into schools, and parts of it are covered in the curriculum, but we think it's got to have a place where we can actually explore it in a little bit more detail.
Well, I mean, I've got a bit of bias here in terms of inclusive change at work and digital safety. We're working together in a partnership to deliver these kind of projects and in different environments. And I mean, my strong belief is that we do have to join together and we look at things from different perspectives. So in terms of down here in the Southwest with inclusive change, working with digital safety, it just opens up a whole lot of different supports and strategies that we can look at, because well-being, mental health, connected through to the online world, as you've talked about in this whole interview, Andy. Lots of things are going back to online, aren't they? And inclusive change, we are very much looking forward to what we can achieve down here in the Southwest. To round everything off then, what can we expect to hear and see at the Castle Conference?
Well, we've got a really, I think, exciting day. We've got some really key speakers, no less than starting off the day with yourself, Lucy, who is
Yes.
going to be opening up our start to the day. But then we've got two following real sort of, I think, interesting and informative speakers, one being Peter Kavalak, Professor Peter Kavalak from Loughborough University, who talks about a crisis and not of their making, which again is related to the younger generation being led down this path of digital harm, but not having the choices and not being in the position to make those choices. And then that's followed up by a lady called Louisa Fassi, who is a PhD researcher from Cambridge University, who then talks about the sort of side of a little bit more statistics, a little bit more around the actual cognitive side of the development of a young adolescent person and how social media can have an effect on them as a person. So that's quite interesting because it puts a slightly different slant on the way that cognitive brain is developing and working and what effect social media can have on that individual. And then we've got quite a number of different people coming to the event who we can speak to, who's going to have stalls, who we can network with, and again, start to build that network of networks, as it's been referred to. But really what that means is a group of professionals who can link into each other, who understand where they can go to when they need that support and help. We then,
it's going to be a good day.
We then go into the afternoon and we'll be looking at exploring potentially, like we did at the first conference, the devastating effects that it can have on children if it's not prevented in the early stages. And we'll be opening and examining some quite serious topics around potentially suicide prevention and how it needs to sort of be addressed and talked about. So there are some dark and some difficult conversations to be had, but we want to keep the environment a safe and friendly environment and allow professionals to come together and take that space and take that sort of conversation to the right people.
We had a visit to the venue last week as we're recording this. So we had a visit to the venue last week, and it's a pretty stunning venue, isn't it? There's a good reason why we've chosen such a nice venue.
Yeah, it's a stunning venue. And we had an inaugural conference in September last year in 23, which was the first type of conference. And this is the second follow on from that. And the first conference was held at a castle, at Lambton Castle, near our office, where it's based in the northeast. And so we decided on that occasion that we think it needs to be quite a special environment for people, because we appreciate that people are coming out of the office for the day. We appreciate that, you know, they've taken time out to fit busy schedules, but also we want them to feel sort of more relaxed and comfortable. And so the second venue that we've chosen is Lee Court, which is on the edge of Bristol. Again, it's a magnificent building. It's been used for many film sets and exclusive Netflix sort of documentaries and films, and it's quite an impressive place. A lot of weddings, a lot of functions there, and we just felt that it was the right environment to bring this sort of topic to. So we've tried to push that little bit of an extra sort of thought around the actual venue and what that means to people coming out for the day.
Absolutely. But what I will say is that the cost for delegates is not excessive. It's nowhere near what you'd expect for a conference in such a venue, because we are asking just £9 a ticket. So £9 for a delegate gets you to join in for this whole day, for us to be able to talk about some really, really hard-hitting and impactful topics. You get lunch. So what more could you say?
No, it's a very full day. It's a full day from 9:30 in the morning till about 4 o'clock, or whenever people feel that they need to leave. And like you say, we've purposely pitched it at the right price. We don't want to put anybody off who can't afford to come, or from any organisation that finds it difficult to procure the money. So we were very keen to get the price right, and we were very keen to follow on the template that we carried out at the first conference into the second conference.
I'm very much looking forward to it. Andy, thank you. We'll round it up. Thank you very much. Andy Jarman from Digital Safety, that's ds-cic.com. I'm Lucy from Inclusive Change at Work, a community interest company. You can find out more information. We'll put links with all of these videos and with all of these audio files. So if you want more, just have a look at icaw-cic.com you'll find all the information about our conference at Lee Court on the 25th of April in 2024. Because if you're watching this in the future, you're too late. Anyway, thanks for everything. Thanks, Andy. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Lucy. Thank you.